On behalf of the chapter, on behalf of the Interiors Committee, we want to welcome you to what is actually one of my favorite events of the year. Architects really talking about their projects, being able to present it, and framing the discussion. It's actually very meaningful to me to hear each of you present each year. We'd like to celebrate this year the 2025 AIA New York Design Awards Program Interiors Showcase. And tonight we honor the recipients of the Interiors Awards category, as well as 4 additional projects from other categories with a significant interiors component. Before we get started, we'd like to thank Susan and I and the Interiors Committee, Samara Kaba of the AIA, who has done so much work in putting this together, and Brian Masana and Eric Gehring of our committee for the enormous amount of work to help to organize everything. A little bit of housekeeping. Please take a moment and silence your cell phones. And one other note is that tonight's talk actually will come with 1.5 learning credits HSW. So if you have not signed in, please give your credits upstairs at the desk. The 1.5 is for people who are actually in attendance per AIA rules. So to get started, part of our Interiors Committee mission is to promote design excellence and to recognize the value of interior architecture in our everyday lives. The Design Awards program is intended to highlight exceptional work by New York City-based architects and by architects practicing in the city. The purpose is to honor the architects, clients, and consultants who work together to achieve design excellence. Each winning project is granted either an honor, merit, or citation, chosen for its design quality, response to a context and community, program resolution, innovation, thoughtfulness, and technique by a jury of independent architects, educators, and planners from outside of New York. The format for tonight's presentation will be a 7 to 8 minute presentation by each winning firm, followed by a panel discussion led by my colleague, Brian Masana of the Interiors Committee. In the interest of time, I will list all the projects and then introduce the first speaker to begin the program, who will then hand off to each subsequent speaker. The winning projects and the firms that designed them in order of tonight's presentation are Interiors Merit Award, Manhattan Pet Adoption Center, designed by Studio Joseph, and presented by Wendy Evans Joseph, FAIA, founder and principal. Interiors Merit Award, Rockefeller Center Rink Level Public Concourse, designed by Inc. Architecture and Design, and presented by Adam Rolston, Drew Stewart, and Neil Shaw. Interior Citation for Materials and Detailing, West Village Townhouse, designed by J.G. Newcomb Architecture, Span Architecture, and Francis Sultana, and will be presented tonight by J.G. Newcomb, AIA. Architecture Honor Award, Portland International Airport, designed by ZGF Architects, Place Landscape Architecture, and Terrapin Bright Green, and presented by Allison Fiddler, IIDA, NCIDQ, Principal, and Talisa Shavarvesh, I hope I got that right, I apologize, Associate. Architecture Citation for, this is a sequence. Architecture Merit Award, The Church, designed by Skolnick Architecture, Hollander Design Landscape Architects, and presented tonight by Lee Skolnick, FAIA Principal. And then Architecture Citation for Resilience and Community Impact for Rockaway Library, designed by Snow Hedda, and presented this evening by Nathan McRae, AIA Director. And finally, Architecture Citation for Innovation in Preservation, Palace Theater, designed by PBDW Architects, Kirchhoff and Rose, Mancini Duffy, and presented tonight by Jim Seeger, AIA, partner at PBDW. The projects will be on view here at the Center of Architecture and an exhibition of award winners from May 1st through September 1st. One final note before tonight's presentation, we invite you to join us for 2 upcoming events organized by the Interiors Committee. Please join us Tuesday, April 15th for the 2025 Interior Speed Presentation hosted by Miller Knoll, and this year's theme is the 2025 Chapter President's Theme, CUIRL, or See You in the Real Life with Interior Public Space. The call for projects is on the website, and the deadline for projects is March 28th. On May 22nd, at the Center for Architecture, is our annual Gil Oberfield Lecture, and we will be announcing the speaker in the next week. And now, Wendy Evans-Joseph at Studio Joseph will present Manhattan Pet Adoption Center. Thank you. Wendy?
Hello. My work is to make places that fulfill human needs, serve a purpose, create shelter. I'm looking for what is missing and move to keep things whole. To build for community means bringing people together who might or might not share a common vision of the world. The poet Mark Strand understood that his words filled a void. For me, what is missing is that armature for social bonding and for shelter, literally and metaphorically. Studio Joseph is a small group of like-minded people. We do not see boundaries or borders to either program or types of design. So graphics, media, furniture, placemaking, and architecture are all part of one fluid palette. We make fun places where people feel like they're the star. And then unexpectedly, everyone comes together and it's a celebration, joy, excitement, being with others. So I believe that a successful institution has a central driving spirit. So finding that connection requires unearthing a core message. So sometimes what is needed is simple yet magical. And if we hit that note, everyone will connect and participate. For the Animal Adoption Center, the soul of the place is the companionship between animals and humans. The existing 110th Street facility is multi-purpose. The welcome is not friendly for families as it serves so many different functions. The animal housing was more about storage than necessarily inspiring a bond. So the DDC identified an adjacent 1930s garage as the place for only cat and dog adoption. Its entry is on 109th, just between 1st and 2nd. The apertures had to remain the same for zoning restriction. So what you're seeing is a large window, which was the garage door, and then a window, which was the sort of pedestrian entry door. Those are repurposed for entry points. So the idea is a simple facade with large windows into a cat colony. And this inspires to the safety of neighborhood interaction and looking in. And we're getting inside. So a closer look, you see this graphic frit that forms a buffer between the animals so they don't get overstimulated as the people look inside, and it just allows a better connection. And looking the other way. It's all kind of a partial rainbow with a flicker of color across the facade. And it picks up on the motion of light, the trees, the leaves, everything that sort of contributes to what it means before you enter. So just quickly, sorry, but the planning is extremely simple, super straightforward, clarity, minimizes circulation, so there's the most room for the animals. And the central spine aligns with the existing skylights. Light is very important for the animal's circadian rhythm. So the building is brick with a timber roof that's above this hunk ceiling here, and both were preserved and reinforced. So this is the existing condition when we arrived. So that's that same view looking back to 109th Street, where we imagined a new type of entry desk, more of a gathering space, a shared table, to emphasize community. And it also forms less of a hierarchical feeling of separation between staff and adoptive families. You know, I always think of those images that Carrie Mae Weems makes, all the different things that happen around a table, and that sort of was an inspiration for what we could do here in the entry. And it took a lot of discussion to get to this point. So it's all very simple on the inside. There is this sort of, the robust color on the outside is balanced with really a black and white palette on the inside that's supporting all the activity of the dogs. And again, you see, and cats, you see the diamond pattern for it. So looking back towards the dog area, so note the not so subtle, another lenticular installation, this time without color, but rather with some of the friendly dogs. And perhaps, obviously, looking the other way, there are the cats. And again, very simple graphics in the cats. This is looking into what they call cat condos. Again, a view back towards the dog kennels, and they're arranged, again, very simply with these skylights down the middle. Again, the use of frit pattern that's quite dense at the dog height, but even small children and others can look over, and that, again, prevents this sort of aggressive behavior that might happen when they're looking at each other. So I encourage all of you to come to Harlem and adopt a cat or a dog and have some fun up here. So returning to Mark Strand, what was missing was that connection between animal and human, actually between human and human, and I try to move to make things whole. Thank you. Okay. And I will pass to ink. There you go.
Great. So I am Adam Ralston of Inc. We're a vertically integrated hybrid studio for those of you who don't know us. We're both architects and interior designers. We are architects, not architects that do interior design. We're not interior designers that do architecture. We work in the space between. So let's start. So talking about Rockefeller Center Rink, the concourse renovation. Why is it not moving forward? There we go. Okay. So one of the things that we as a studio do is take a, wow, this is not good. We take a forensic approach to the place, the history, and the culture. Why is this doing this? Sorry, you guys. Okay, here we go. Okay, so interestingly enough, oh my God. Okay, interestingly enough, why is this doing this, guys? There, perfect. How did you do it?
I just pressed it once, but it kept it on the platform instead of picking it up.
Do you want to do it? And I'll say next. That's where I want to stop. Reset?
Yes, we are. Sorry about this.
I swear it wasn't me.
I
So maybe I'll just talk about it. So we take kind of a forensic approach to place. So looking at the aesthetic world of a place, both physically, the history of it, the culture that's there. Rock Center was a rich location to look at. And interesting, there's three populations that we had to navigate. The tourist, the New Yorker, and the office worker. And so finding a language that those three populations would identify with was the task, that was the mandate. Also, you guys know that the rink was kind of a mess, the concourse below. We're talking about the lower concourse, and Neil's gonna come up and talk us through the actual plans. But interestingly, the land that the concourse was on was a garden. It was called the Elgin Botanical Garden. And one of the plans that we found in that research, and Rock Center has an incredible library of research, of sort of collateral that they've got, historical collateral. That plan right there that you just saw for 2 seconds was the actual plan of the garden, and we kind of reinstated that underground. That was the kind of exciting move. And the goal, I think if you guys have been down there, and Neil will show you this, you couldn't really get access to the ice skating rink in the courtyard unless you paid for it in this kind of transactional way for dining in the restaurant there. So the goal and the mandate from Tishman Speyer from the very beginning was to democratize the rink, to bring access to the public, the people that are going to the buildings, to the subway, that kind of thing, give them access to the courtyard.
I'm so sorry, it's just,
That's okay.
there just seems
It's all
to
good for
be-
me, I'm happy talking.
It just seems to be an issue with your specific slides. I'm really not sure why it's happening.
So it was
yeah,
me.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I tried going over to a different one.
You could do it just in that form.
Yeah, let me do it one more time. I'm gonna try it in your.
Oh, maybe it's got a timer on.
Yeah, I tried that. That's not this. Alrighty. Yeah, it's just kind of going on its own. If you want to just, I can unmute it and like kind of just do what it wants to do. Sorry about this. This is your specific one.
Okay, so I'll just talk through it.
Okay, I'm so sorry.
I'll talk really fast.
Yeah. Hopefully, maybe it'll just stay.
We're so used to swiping on Instagram, like, it'll be slow to you guys.
It's just your slides. I'm not really sure what's going on. Cool.
That's not it.
Yeah, it's not gonna. If I go back to your slide, it's just not gonna.
I think our time is up. Maybe we should move on to the next? Yeah? Okay. What?
We want to hear you.
Okay. Maybe just do it in like normal mode, not presentation mode.
Okay,
Because that
yeah.
would not trigger the timer.
Yeah, let's do that. Oh, that's a good idea.
And maybe make it a little
Yeah.
bigger so that folks can
Yeah,
see
it's
it.
definitely not on timer mode, so I'm not
do that.
sure. It
Just
might
do
just
that.
be
It's fine.
corrupt.
It's fine.
Cool.
It's fine.
Awesome.
Okay, so both looking at the site, so the history, then looking at the actual DNA of the building, and we literally take these things apart. So there's this idea of kind of extrusive forms. You can imagine the building itself, this kind of vertical flow. All of the interiors were very different from the exterior at Rock Center, the original interiors, because there was a tremendous flow involved. And then ripple, we all know the kind of idea of Radio City Music Hall, this idea of ripple. Those became the three formal pillars that drove the design. Neil, you want to do this, Neil, or should I just do it? Okay. So you guys all know the site, but for those that are online or aren't in the city, don't know it, it's the town square of New York City, as it were. It's the center of the island. And it's surrounded by these extraordinary extrusive buildings. The mandate was to take the concourse and connect all of the buildings. They are connected underground, and the subway. So the subway is to the left, the post office to the right. The first diagram you can see is the way that it was. We exploded that and then established a series of restaurants, 5 restaurants that surround it. The access points, the whole point of the diagram here is to give access to those 6 points, north, south, east, and west. And then democratizing the rink and bringing view into the rink and the plaza when it's not the rink. And then primary and secondary circulations, opening up both primary and secondary circulations for the various populations that are there. So an office worker can skip a kind of a circuit. And then the final plan. And then the final images. So, you guys all know this. The entrances, you come down the stairs. Gabellini Shepherd, a shout out, did do the stairs going down. The entrances are right and left. So that's the main entrance. That's marked by this kind of glowing light or extrusive forms. And you can see the sort of flow, and we call this in this context architectural wayfinding, where the light is where you go. So this cove is not only a threshold to expose the existing building and show its history, but also to guide you through the space and to make the spaces coherent. We also designed a restaurant in the center. It's the main anchor restaurant, and it is a restaurant without walls. There is this kind of indoor-outdoor game that we're playing, bringing the patios as they were in relation to the rink. So that sits right in front of the rink. It's a farm-to-table restaurant, so growing green underground was an interesting task that Neil had to tackle. With private dining rooms and a wallpaper that was done by me during COVID upstate with actual plants. And then just you can see details like, say, the lamp or the paneling there that's limestone or reaggregated limestone. These are all details that were literally deconstructed from, say, 30 Rock, the most beautiful lobby in New York. We also exposed skylights. I don't know if you guys know, but all the fountains there are, the base of them are skylights, so those are also filled with water. And then connections to the various office buildings. So the DNA of Rock Center reconstituted in a seamless and yet contemporary and high-performance manner to bring a new center to the city.
That's you, right?
Happy to be here, slightly terrified. What's going on here? It was an excellent job, Adam. So my name is J.G. Newcomb, J.G. Newcomb Architecture. I want to thank AIA, New York, AIA Interiors, and Center for Architecture for hosting this tonight. It's always nice to share ideas and discuss projects with colleagues and friends. I'm not going to move this thing. I'm just going to leave it here. All right, so the project we're presenting, it's a townhouse in the West Village, about 5,300 square feet. The award was for materials and detailing, so I'm going to split this up into some materials and some detailing. I'm going to keep it kind of simple. In terms of the materials, it was quite difficult. So we're working with an interior designer, Francis Sultana, who's wonderful. But we're really coming at things from, I'm just going to say, very, very different aesthetic viewpoints. Clients similarly were possibly not on the same page. I think she was a little bit more of a maximalist. He was a little bit more of a John Pawson minimalist. They're still married. It's all good. But we're trying to resolve these productive tensions in this kind of four-way handshake. And I think the theme of this on materials. I think materials were really something that were in many ways the way to do that. So I think it was kind of an appropriate topic for tonight and how we got to the end goal. We start off, a lot of this has to do with, the theme is really kind of very simple architecture that allows for these more intense moments, these materials, these details, all of these things. But the base plan is actually quite straightforward and very simple. It's a very constrained site. It's an old, actually federal style building from the 18th century. So, quite small floor plate. When you enter through the sidewalk through these massive doors, in front of you are these two cast bronze metal doors by artist Michelle Akadonner, whose studio is on Mercer Street, not too far away. She's pretty, if you don't know her, look her up. Michelle Akadonner, extraordinary artist. And I think there was something really wonderful here about the sort of diaphanous quality of light that comes through. We've got the transom that brings light through into the main space, but when you come in, you can sort of see, but you can't quite see, and there's this sort of this ambiguity which we really liked. They only fell off the hinge once, so that was got fixed pretty quickly, so slightly terrifying also. So moving into the space, there's a ground level. There's an overbuilt sort of non-compliant overbuilt rear yard, which served as a gallery, which was kind of facing behind the staircase. And obviously, they have a pretty sizable art collection. So a lot of this was also trying to create this narrative pathway for the art and how they can frame and reframe the property and how they can move things around over time was important, that we weren't locked into any one thing. Obviously, then you start to see the staircase. The staircase threads its way through the space, and I'll talk about that a little bit later in the detailing of that. That's a view back to the sort of the gallery space, big fireplace in the rear. And, obviously this light detail is something that leads you through the space, much like Adam's lovely project. And we'll talk about that. So moving to the second floor, again, it's a very constrained site, quite simple floor plan. It's essentially a dumbbell. So there's, on the far end is a library sitting room, behind is a dining room, in the middle is a kitchen. It's really that simple. And I think the goal, for almost all of our projects, the goal is really to try to create a viewpoint end-to-end in any project to maximize the sense of space while creating these sort of subdivided areas. I think for me, what was interesting and what worked here, again, in terms of resolving that four-handed handshake, there's a sort of a hopscotch between these different palettes and these different areas, but there's a material connection that happens. So you see a little bit of that room, but you see a little bit of that room when you're in this room. And there's a nice consistency and a kind of a quite dynamic quality. This is looking back towards the dining room. Even Francis's beautiful Brazilian furniture has some undertones in the marble. The light fixture was from Jorge Pardo, which was a super fun guy to work with. Look him up too if you don't know him. And again, creating a lot of surfaces for the art. So I think that, in a nutshell, this floor really kind of is very typical of how the approach was and how we use these materials to sort of help bridge our various gaps, right? This is the living room, the sitting room, I should say. So a lot of leather detailing on the shelves, cast bronze fireplace around, a little hard to see here. Going up to the upper floors, so the primary bedroom. When you do these kind of sculptural staircases, as an architect, it's fun. Go inside and you find all these different, conditions that you didn't really model or you didn't really think about. So it's always nice to have some surprise built into it. We try not to model too many things for the clients. I like it when they show up on site and they don't just say like, oh, it looks like the rendering. It's like, oh, it's a surprise. After 4 years, it's great. On some of the smaller spaces, so one of the things we really like to do, we do a lot of residential work, we do a lot of large-scale interiors, hospitality, multi-resi condos, things like that. One of the things I would really like to do is design these really small spaces. So on the left is this powder room. Love designing elevator interiors. It's my weird little hobby. I think one of the things that's nice about it, it's a moment where you're there, nobody's talking to you, you have a moment to think a little bit. It's a much more intimate space where you have a minute to be with yourself. I always think of it, it's a little bit of a, from the designer to whoever's using it, it's a little bit of a hug. You're there, you're in close quarters. So I actually really, we spend a lot of time making these things. Again, here, it's the same kind of mantra as the floor plan. It's quite simple, very simple lines, but it allows for some space for these materials to stand out. We really picked exactly that layout of the stone with that piece there. It was very intentional and purposeful. And when you're not working with a ton, you really try to be very careful with the things that you are showing. They like green a lot. So that's a little bit on the materiality. I did want to focus on one little detail, which was that little bronze edge on the staircase. So I thought very naively it'd be nice, so we take all these nice photos. Sometimes we're lucky to be published, we'll win an award or here and there. But that's great. But where we get a lot of our next projects is from what the client touches, right? So that, that relationship that you're creating this little message to a client with what they touch. That sort of tactile sensibility is super important. So here I thought at the time, and when we were designing this, why don't we do a little curved, angle in bronze that wraps around, and that'll be nice to touch, and we'll put a light in there. It'll be kind of cool. And I was like, yeah, sure, that's easy. Well, you can't do that. You can't curve an angle. It's a compound curve, and it'll crunch, and it'll be ugly. And it turns out we had to make it out of a milled piece of, like a 2.5 by 2.5 inch milled piece of brass. It was news to me. So very collaborative process. We are a very collaborative firm. I know everyone says that. We really are. We had a great team between the engineer and the contractor we worked with for 15 years. You know, Armadillo did the metal work. We really came up with this detail to make this work. And, you know, at one point I said, like, I don't know, let's just do it out of wood. Like, this is a lot. And they said, no, we're going to work together. We're going to figure it out. So we did. It was great. I'd be lying if I said I knew how to do this day one. But, like, that's how you learn. And you go on site and you spend a lot of time. And of all the photos I took, this is probably one of my favorites of this project. You see the little turnbuckle screw in the middle. They came up with that so that you could twist that and bring the two pieces of metal tight, right? So it's super hairline. And then they, you know, you use the aluminum to template the whole project. That's during construction. But, you know, basically templated the whole thing in aluminum, brought it to the shop, made the handrail, brought it back with the aluminum. It is like a multi-layer process. The plaster work took end to end was exactly 12 months just to do the plaster on the stair, just this one piece. So it was, you know, it was a real labor of love. It was our friend from Armadillo who's calibrating everything, making sure it works. A couple more of the installation photos. I think it's always, you know, I do a lot of photography. I really enjoy photographing the sites as they're progressing. You really learn a lot. It's also a nice teaching tool in the office to see what happened, what's there, you know, where everything's buried. I guess the last minute or two, I'd love to talk about lighting for a second. It's something that we think a lot about and work a lot on. You know, everyone thinks of lighting as sort of downlights and lamps and whatever, you know, incandescent things. But I'd like to think about lighting as, where you can, as something that's part of the architecture, right? Like architectural services are a form of lighting, right? So we have this big skylight at the top. You know, how that translates down when the house has no lights on is really interesting. You know, that these surfaces are a part of that tripartite scheme. You know, we always talk about those 3 layers of lighting, but this is really a thing in and of itself. You know, you can be in this room, in this house during the day and nothing's on, and I think it feels actually pretty nice, right? So I'm just going to leave it at that, and thank you, and I will click to Portland International Airport.
Don't push the wrong buttons.
No pressure. Thank you so much for having us. Quickly, just to share a little bit about ZGF that we think is really relevant to the project, is that our roots are in the Pacific Northwest. Portland was our first office. It's still our largest office, but it's really infused as a firm how we think about building, how we think about sustainability in the environment. And we think it's really relevant to how we approach the Portland International Airport project. So first, the goals. There were a few here. The first was to keep the airport operational during construction. We also needed to double the airport for passenger capacity over the next few years. There was a huge commitment to resiliency and sustainability. And then my personal goal was the airport needed to transcend functionality, and it needed to lean into the beauty and the awe of the Pacific Northwest. It's also one of America's most beloved airports. If you ask people of Portland, the most beloved airport, so we did not take that responsibility lightly. The drivers that kind of brought us through the whole project were to reduce stress, to have intuitive wayfinding that influences the organization, and connect back to the region through material and craft. But really what we're talking about here is an elevated passenger experience.
Great. So when looking for inspiration, we turn to Portland itself, which is a city that prioritizes and cherishes and is a little bit obsessed with its parks and its proximity to nature. Being a team of crunchy little hikers, we landed on the concept of a walk in the forest pretty early on. We love our trees, which not only projects a sense of the space that you're arriving into, but also helps us with our first goal of reducing stress, because who doesn't love forest bathing? When you think of a walk in the forest, it's so much more than a visual experience. It's more than just looking at some trees. It's a visceral experience. It's warmth, it's the sound, it's the feeling, it's the way that the dappled light hits your face. It's three-dimensional movement, and it's discovery. Oh, thank you. We embrace the airport as a gateway to Portland, the first thing that you see when you arrive and the last impression when you leave. And since Portland is the birthplace and headquarters of our firm, for the sake of ourselves and our friends and our family and everybody we know who's gonna have to use this airport for the next 50 years, we felt a lot of pressure to not mess it up. We leaned into all the tools that we had available to us during this process, which included a lot of really sophisticated and cutting-edge parametric CAD modeling software, but also a lot of old school physical scale modeling, which is where I came in as the lead model builder of this project. We built models of just the airport for about 6 straight years. Physical modeling has always been a part of ZGF culture, but we really ramped it up with this project, building models to take outside to study how real sunlight would enter the skylights and really illuminate the space through different times of day and different times of the year, and crouching down to crawl inside of models to get a real sense of the scale of the space. It's pretty atypical for airports to be a space that you actually want to spend time in. And more often than not, they're focused on the most efficient way to process passengers to their final destination. You can get a sense of the warmth in the details of this space. Hopefully you see it. All of this that you're seeing is pre-security, by the way. It's for all of Portland to be invited in to use the space as kind of like an urban living room. But you can see the warmth of the wood surrounding you on so many different surfaces, to the scale of the trees, to the organic quality of the custom lighting and the pattern of the terrazzo, really capturing the spirit of the forest.
So when it came to wayfinding organization, it was really crucial for how passengers would be able to access the space. We spent a lot of time also thinking about the scale of the different spaces as the passenger were to move through the airport. So for inspiration on this, we looked at the city of Portland itself and the urban planning. It's really important to note to this room that a Portland block is much smaller than a New York City block. But if you think about airports really are just small cities. You have that main thoroughfare, that quieter sidewalk, and then of course the businesses and buildings themselves. So we were able to translate that into the interior of the airport. You see here, the only difference is it's all under one roof. But how do you make a space like this not feel immediately overwhelming? So for starters, when you're dropped off in the lower part of the screen and you enter the space, you can see all the way through to the airfields beyond. So anywhere you are in the project, you're able to use that to orient yourself. We also spent a lot of time thinking of it as a series of rooms, which of course is every interiors, but the thresholds were really, really critical in letting passengers feel that they've entered into a different part of the space. So for example, in security, the ceilings are lower, there's carpet underfoot. The space where you feel the most exposed and stressed is where we've kind of enveloped and cocooned you. And then as you move into the recomposure space, the ceiling lifts, you have access to the natural light, and you physically feel the floor under you change from the carpet to the wood. So we invite you to take a moment to, thank you, to Lisa, to take a moment to pause and breathe.
That was,
And here's just zooming in on that idea, the main thoroughfare to the right, the street light separating out the sidewalk, and then moving into the businesses, which are the buildings of this little city. And then, of course, we didn't want to let go of the idea of walking through the forest. You always have that biophilia, you always have that wood, you always have that tactile experience. But the other thing we wanted to do with the materials is really bring back the romance of air travel. There's so many different stories here tying it to Portland, but the materials really helped elevate the space. Walls that could have just been gyp are clad in stone, connecting passengers back to nature. The image in the bottom left, the artist took inspiration from quilts that he found in the Oregon Historical Society. The wood flooring you've seen in many of these images already is actually reclaimed wood scraps that are typically discarded. A local company was able to turn that into wood flooring for us, and now that's part of their production and their line. And in the upper left, you see one of the two digital murals that flank the stadium seating. And by making it digital, we're able to include many more artists, and a digital medium is also a lot more inclusive as many have access to it. And then lastly, we can't forget the story behind how we've sourced a lot of our wood in the space and the undeniable impact the roof and ceiling structure has on the interior experience.
So the roof obviously is the big showstopper of the project. It's the image on all of the magazine covers. And it is worth noting that a significant amount of the wood that's used in this project all came from within 300 miles of the project itself, which in a sustainability sense was pretty phenomenal. As someone who didn't work on the wood, I'm still impressed by that. Didn't do the sourcing. But to get to the final form of the roof that we see in the final installation, we leaned pretty heavily on both our software and our physical modeling to get to this point. And working on the model side of it, I think it's worth noting that they had so much more benefit to the project than just figuring out what it was going to look like at the end. We ended up using the models to help solve problems in construction with our consultants and our fabricators themselves, going as far as bringing them into our model shop to see how we made the model and using that to inform the final fabrication of the glue lamp structure. It ended up being the way that we built the model was almost exactly how we built the real thing, just a bit bigger. It helped the client understand our vision. I think the quality of light and the feeling of the space is very difficult to capture in renderings and in sketches. So bringing models to the meetings to talk to our client helped us really sell it as a project. And it helped us communicate with each other. Models are kind of like a fireplace. When people see a model, people tend to gather around it and they like to talk about it. So we'll just end on the idea that as sophisticated as software is to our process and how much it's evolving very quickly, this project was a reminder that we're not in the business of making beautiful two-dimensional renderings or photos for magazines. We're making three-dimensional spaces for people to actually occupy and have beautiful experiences in, and dare I say, to love. I personally really love this project as someone who's from Portland, and I think if you get a chance to visit, you will feel it too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lee Skolnick, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the church. I'm a resident of Sag Harbor since the pandemic. That's our primary residence, actually. And one very interesting thing about this project, which architects and designers will appreciate, is because we were stuck out there, I mean, not a bad place to be, but we were stuck out there during construction. I went to the construction site every day because what else was I going to do? And it made such a difference, and it sort of put me in mind of how they built cathedrals, you know, where the master builder was scratching things in the dirt. So we came up with all our detailing by making it, and it was a great it's a great experience for people like us who thrive on that. Oh. So, historic preservation. I just gave a talk last week at the church, actually, to Preservation Long Island, which used to be called SPLIA, the Society for the Protection of Long Island Antiquities. So we won this preservation award, and they said, we'd like you to give a speech. And I said, people don't want to hear from a preservationist. I want to talk about how preservation is a creative act unto itself. It's not just, fixing up an old building. So the first thing is you need to understand that someone was talking about the DNA of the situation of the building, of the site. This was a Methodist church. You can see over on the far left there, the original steeple, which blew off like a lot of steeples in the 1938 hurricane, and they never rebuilt it until now. But this is what we inherited. They had already stripped it out. There were a few people who bought it before my clients, and one was going to turn it into a workshop for designing fabric and wallpaper. Another was going to turn it into a house. This being the Hamptons, everybody kept going bankrupt. And then the last owner put it on the market for $23 million. Of course, nobody was interested. My clients bought it for $3 million, and we spent about $3 million completely renovating it. So it looked like this. There were incredible artifacts. You can see in that king post and the truss, one of the carpenters carved his initials and the date, 1864. So this is a word only architects like, interventions. We cleared the entire space out, and then what was left was so phenomenal, so beautiful, that our job as designers was simply to do the least amount possible, to let the building speak, and anything that we would put in there would be in a different language than the original, so it was a very clear and contrast between the two. Oh, you don't need to see that. So this is what we had, as I said. The basement had never had a real floor in it. We poured a concrete floor. But the more we took away, the more we realized how beautiful just the space itself and just the structure itself was. So we started to insert things, and you don't need a guidebook. Anything that is painted gray is white oak or is painted chipboard is new. Everything else is original. Now, in order to create this conversation between old and new, you have to come up with some clever, I'll call it creative problem solving. One of them was this was going to be a public building, so it had to have an elevator. Where should we put the elevator? We don't want to hide it. We wound up putting it exactly where the pulpit originally was. And as you can see, as a glass and steel structure, it makes, it's not ambiguous that this is a new insertion. We took all the lath that had been, the lath strips that had been on the framing, and stripped the plaster off and used it to enclose any spaces that we needed. So we wanted to reuse the existing material. And then there are a couple of very modern interventions, as you can see. But the whole idea was that what we put in the space was going to float away from the perimeter walls. So we came up with all these ways of keeping the floor from hitting the walls. In this case, we made these metal grates in the steeple so that when you walked in the front door, you could look up and see all the way to the top of the belfry. The clients were two artists, Eric Fischel and April Gornick, and we have 20-foot high windows, and we said, well, none of the stained glass exists anymore. What should we do? So Eric came up with this idea. He did portraits of 22 artists, writers, musicians, dancers, poets who did work in Sag Harbor. So you're talking about E.L. Doctorow, Betty Friedan, a whole bunch of musicians, and this Herman Melville, because Herman Melville lived there when he was writing Moby Dick. So what we invented was a new kind of stained glass. He did the painting on Mylar. We had it scanned and digitally printed onto this, this translucent material, and then inserted it, just like stuck it in that space. His idea was that not only did you have to be an artist who worked in Sag Harbor, but you had to be dead. So the idea was that over time, we could peel these off. Not that these people would not be dead anymore, but we'd have a new class of deceased people. This is one of the little tricks. Does this really work? Yeah, it does. In order to keep the floor from hitting the window, we made these glass strips. So again, everything was held away from the opposite. So, and again, something only architects like, exploded axonometric. But we needed to do this in order to understand how would we pay tribute and homage to the original, and how would we differentiate the new and modern. So white oak floors, that's new. Gray steel, that's new. All the incredible timber framing, it formed these geometric patterns. I mean, this was not built to be seen. But once we stripped it all off, it was so gorgeous that we decided to expose all of it, and we just insulated in between the studs. We put some additional insulation on the outside and waterproofing. And the same thing with the ceiling. Whoops, 1 second. The ceiling would never have been seen. In fact, it had a flat ceiling. We wanted to expose those timbers, so we insulated the roof on the outside so we could always enjoy the framing. So I call this revelations. You know, one of the things that happens when you're doing any renovation, but certainly one of a historic building, is you find things that you never knew were there. And one of the belfry didn't have a bell in it. And there were all these theories about what happened to the bell, and that someone said it was cast by the same metal worker who cast the Liberty Bell. And we had given up, and we decided we would close up the belfry and just call it a day. And then right towards the end of the construction, someone found a crate that had been buried under all this material, and the bell was in there. So we lifted it, we had it lifted up, and when you come to visit, you can ring it. It's a beautiful tone. A couple of other revelations. You know, we had a great lighting designer. It's a woman from Brooklyn called the Seed. Highly recommend working with her. So she did the lighting for us. And the first night that we turned on all the lights, somebody ran in and said, "You've got to come outside. You're not going to believe what this looks like." And it was just this glowing, you know, jack-o'-lantern. And you could see all the detail through the windows. And then one night, one evening in the summer, the sunset, this was like an Indiana Jones moment, the sunset went all the way through from the west facade through to the east facade and lit the one piece of stained glass that was still extant and just made it glow like it was on fire. So one of the great things is to see all the different, because we did so little, it's a very flexible space. So they have art installations. The second floor of the steeple we turned into a study center. We've had artists come in and do installations that are in conversation with the building and its structure. Lectures, interviews, big gatherings, music and dance, and workshops. And I think that's it. Oh, no. Oh, yeah, they have a holiday bazaar in there every year. Oh, and yoga. Thank you.
Great projects. I've only been to the airport in Portland. I'm from there, and it's amazing, but I need to get out more and see the rest of these. They're wonderful. I'm Nathan McRae, director at Snowhetta, and I was the project manager when I started at Snowhetta in 2011, and this was the first project that I worked on. The explanation for why it took 13 years, it opened last year, is one that would take longer than the 8 minutes that I have. So let's talk about the interiors. Actually, I looked at this and when asked to do this presentation thought, this is insane. How am I gonna explain this, how this happened? And so I have an agenda here, which is to explain to you in 8 minutes how this is completely sensible and rational and came from a very clear, reasonable series of design decisions. So let's see if I can do that. No booing if I fail. So initially, we conceived of this as needing to declare itself public, to be civic, to be something other than what is there so people would know it was a public building that they could go to. The context, I don't know if anybody's been there, is very kind of loud, chaotic. What is it? Next to it is Golden Crunch, right? The chicken place. Across the street is a dollar store with every color of 8.5 by 11s printed to declare what's on sale, which is everything. So it's very, very cluttered and chaotic, and we wanted this to stand apart from that by being really a super simple envelope. So I think it does that. But then how do you make it something more than that? We decided to clad it for financial reasons in an off-the-shelf curtain wall. So it's Conair curtain wall. I forgot something, which is there's no way to explain this building without just explaining it because as a building, because the architecture, the exterior and interior are one and the same. It's a couple of moves that are as much exterior as interior. You'll see when you look at the interior, 50% of it is the exterior envelope. So, and the entry move and the atrium move are what make the interior and the exterior, really. So, in deciding how to articulate the building, we were struck by one of the beautiful things that many places by the beach, but we particularly noticed it in Far Rockaway. The sky is beautiful, in contrast to kind of some of the visual clutter. So within this image, actually, is the gradient on the facade of the building. So we had that figured out, and then realized that we needed something to create a sense of scale that relates to a person. We had this building scale move, big, clear, simple building envelope, basically a big rectangle with a fold in it to create more space on the sidewalk. And then we needed it to be relatable. So this is work of an artist, Jose Parla, who we've done more than one project with. He works in, it's paint and it's script based. So this project on the left and on the left side is something that he did for a library in North Carolina with us, Hunt Library, which got us thinking that this could be an opportunity to make the building envelope essentially a piece of art. He created this for us, which is the actual piece of art which was applied to the facade in digitally printed frit over the gradient. And you can see it has a gradient itself from lower in the building to higher in the building. That's how we applied it over, let me see if this works. So you can see here, these are kind of another gradient of opacity with the writing on top of it. The opacity, I can explain here, works in that it's 40% open, which we determined is about how transparent it needs to be able to see out. And then it gets more and more opaque as you work your way up to cut down on solar heat gain. So this is the kind of effect on the inside. We also had to make sure that it didn't turn everything inside orange, because nobody wants to be in a building where everything is orange. And I can't explain why, but when light comes through digitally printed frit, no matter what color it is not impacted by the color of the glass, which is bizarre to me, but it's just completely neutral. So rooms like this are unaffected. even though you have this beautiful effect on the glass. You can see here that we had to calibrate, making sure you didn't feel like you were in a completely enclosed. You had a view out, but you're also a little bit protected from what's going on outside. You don't have people peering in. And that 40% is about what it turned out to be required to do that. From the outside, as you can see here, it's completely opaque in the daylight, and at night it becomes luminous. So it's really dynamic and can have these reflective effects, which is, I think, quite special. Back to why it's sensible. So we offset the opening here is this triangle, which I'll get to in a second, but we offset that by about 5 feet, a typical curtain wall module, and then needed to figure out structure. So you often set a curtain wall right on a structural column and equally divide it between them. Couldn't do that here because we had offset from the entry, so we had an angled column. We tried an angled column and realized that if we created this series of angled columns, they would hold the roof up, hold the floors up, and also create the lateral bracing necessary on these large glazed facades. So they allowed us to have, you can see here following that first mullion, allowed us to have large expanses of glazing with the same number of columns you would need anyway, and you don't have to have shear walls or cross bracing because the columns are the cross bracing. So this is an early study of taking this big simple mass and how to break it down into these two big moves, which is the entry triangle that says you've got a super clear envelope. How do you let people know where to get in? So we cut a triangle there, and we cut this kind of inverse triangle or pyramid into the center of the deepest portion of the floor plate in order to let light in, to get light into the deepest part of the building so we could maximize daylight. We've already sort of maximized it around the perimeter with the gradient of Frit, and then on the interior, well, so here these are a couple studies of that. I jumped ahead. But anyway, this is that kind of simple, almost rectangular form that tapers back a little bit on both sides to create a little more room on the corner. It's a pretty narrow sidewalk. You can see the perimeter structure and then the structure of the atrium in the middle. The program's super simple. It's really small building, 18,000 square feet. So over here is a teen center on the ground floor. When you come in, it's really circulation and the circulation desk and the stair up through the atrium. This is all back of house. And then at the top floor, this is really the main room of the library. So it's got an adult space here, reading room along the glass, and a children's area here, multi-purpose room here and here. But really kind of simple, clear envelope. So this was an early study of what that looked like. This is an in-house rendering that we did where you can see the columns kind of working through behind the glass there. And then this is the way it ended up. So not far off. We had professional renderings that looked a lot better than this. The thing I find funny about this is that who would have thought that thing stayed there after they built a brand new sidewalk, regraded the whole neighborhood, and that stick is still there. We thought optimistically it would go away, but no. So this is the atrium, the skylight before it was obviously finished. The columns adhere to defining that envelope of the inverted pyramid so that they stay out of the way of circulation. So they're kind of compact and tightly defining the edge of that space. This is the baffle that was carefully calibrated to refract and reflect light in the interior to cut down on glare, make sure there's not too much light, make sure there's enough, and it was studied with models to kind of optimize it. It looks insane, but it works really well. And it has this beautiful effect that you would never think is anything but insanity. We placed a stair in that atrium space to encourage people to use the stair, active design, create an experience out of it. The end walls on the interiors are sheetrock. There was enough going on that we thought, well, as simple as we can for the rest of the enclosure on the inside. And those happen to be the only place to put the percent for the artwork. So there's this work that Pablo Helguera did that occupies every clean wall in the space. So on the upper floor, it's here. On the other side of the adult area, it's there. So we tried to kind of dial it back and have some neutral surfaces to counteract all of this and this that we did. And then we ended up with more. And I'm not downplaying the art, I like it. But it's just like every surface has got something going on. And then there is this guy, which came kind of late, which I'll get to in a second. The ceiling is a simple dropped acoustical panel, which organizes the light fixtures and the sprinklers in a very linear kind of simple way. So it's, I think, rational. We've talked about these columns. We've talked about the enclosure of these columns and the skylight. There was a late coming change in the enclosure of the atrium, and various parties really wanted a glass railing. So we didn't want a clear glass railing that was smudged with fingerprints all over it that Queens Library can't keep clean. So we found this dichroic glass, which just like gave it one more level of intensity. This kind of kaleidoscopic effect that bounces light all over the place and is really fun, I think. But here we are back to where we started. And maybe it seems like a rational project to you. I don't know. Anyway, that's it.
Everyone, Jim Sager with PBDW Architects to talk about the Palace Theater. Let me see if I can get this going here. Okay, we worked on this project with, it's part of a larger development, TSX Broadway, which we worked on with Mancini Duffy, who was the architect of record for the overall development, and PBDW was the theater architect and preservation architect for the project. This is a remarkable project because as part of the overall development, we lifted the theater 30 feet in the air. And not only did it survive that, but it is now kind of revitalized and set up for success for decades to come. So let's get into it. The theater has gone through a few iterations of development over its lifetime. On the left was the original iteration. The site is on the corner of 47th and 7th Avenue facing Times Square. So the theater was set behind this 11-story tower in its original iteration. In the early 90s, Fox and Fowle did a development where they constructed a hotel over the top of the theater on super columns. The original tower was taken down in that development. Still, the theater entrance was off of Times Square. And in 2024, TSX Broadway was completed, and in this iteration, the theater was lifted 30 feet. That made space for 4 levels of retail on Times Square. The entrance to the theater was switched over to the side street on 47th Street, and a new hotel tower was redeveloped above that. The original theater was designed by Kirchhoff and Rose, completed in 1913 originally, and it was characterized by this grand proscenium arch with these smaller clamshell arches flanking each side, and these cascading boxes down each side of the orchestra, a double balcony, and its sort of defining feature is this cornucopia of decorative plaster. So here's a diagram of kind of the before on the left, Times Square facing the left. You can see the theater entrance coming straight in off of Times Square, the theater being at ground level, one basement level of sort of back of house space, and then the 1990s hotel suspended or trussed over the top. On the right is the new development theater. You can see the box was raised. The new retail placed in at street level off of Times Square with a couple of basement levels, and new entertainment and hotel functions kind of surrounding it on the upper levels. So we started out by scaffolding the entire interior. This allowed us to get in and survey the conditions and also monitor the condition of the theater during the lift. And during this time, we also did some plaster casting of molds of the plaster details throughout. And here's a shot of looking sort of at the top of the theater in the attic where, plaster was reinforced, before the lift. So new supports were added and this plaster daubing was added. And that happened, throughout where needed, just to kind of fortify the plaster before the lift. Down below, this new dynamic foundation was being constructed, which consists of a ring beam. I don't know if you can see it here, at the risk of this ring beam here, cast in place concrete ring beam that took the place of the original foundation, perimeter foundation, and then these kind of column within a column supporting with caissons that went down to the ultimate, bottom level, and that facilitated the lift. So here's some details of those columns within a column. So the square column is the part that moves. The caisson, the round caisson below, goes all the way down to grade. It was excavated out down to that level. The new subgrade floor levels were added around it to kind of support all of this before they started the lift. And the lift works with these jacks here set between these plates. And these threaded rods go down to the bottom of the square column. There's a plate at the bottom that kind of supports that. And as those jacks are lifted, it lifts up the rods, it lifts up the square columns. These nuts on these plates are sort of tightened down at the bottom. The jacks are released. The nuts at the top are brought down. And that happens in sort of 3-inch lifts, 3-inch increments of lifts. And these are all kind of tied together with this kind of uber hydraulic control panel in the middle of everything. So they're all being monitored and lifted at simultaneously. But, 120 times and you've gone up 30 feet in the air. So that it took about, I'd say about 2 weeks in total, but it was done in sort of 2 sections with time in between to do monitoring and check conditions. And here's a view of the original condition on the left. You can see these openings. These are the original exits from the theater at the sidewalk level, and it's kind of hard to see, but there's one of them kind of lifted after the lift was completed. So once the lift was completed, went back in to install all the infrastructure, and that required removal of some plaster to get into the, behind the surfaces, to install new wiring, new sprinklers, low voltage lighting, things like that. We tried to focus on removal of flat plaster as much as possible. On the walls, new HVAC installed, and then you see some of the openings that had been at grade are now being kind of closed up. This is all kind of happening sequentially, but also simultaneously from the top down. Once the infrastructure was installed, some of the plaster elements that had either been damaged or had been removed for the install were recast. Some elements had been taken off and were being reinstalled. The original, it was all done using the original sort of construction techniques. We developed a new palette for the interior. It was referential to the original palette, but kind of with a modern sort of angle to it. which consisted of sort of this gray, this gold motif set off by the dark blue, which was, in the ceiling. It was in some of the trims that you see here, and it was also in the seating and the carpeting. And then that was kind of tied together with a series of neutral tones. One of the major things was this wall covering. Originally there was a silk wall covering that kind of had a shimmer to it, and we recreated that in a treated canvas that was fire retardant, and that helps to kind of bounce light around inside the theater. So the painting of the decorative plaster, was one of the next steps. We started with a mock-up where we worked with the artisans to refine the colors. There was a lot of hand detail put in, glazes and foil appliques that really helped to catch the light and kind of accentuate these forms. And there were maybe 24 artisans who took about 2 or 3 months to kind of work their way through the theater to develop all of this. Lighting was also important. Obviously, one of the major things that we did here was that the original chandelier was missing. And so this was a new chandelier we designed sort of in the Art Deco, and that really helps to kind of accentuate and anchor the ceiling and cast light around on a lot of that decorative plaster. Here's some details of the finished plaster work. This detail on the left is a motif that's at the top of the proscenium arch, and it kind of connects the arch to this cove mold that goes around the ceiling. This part of the cove is at the back of the theater, and we used some attic space to relocate the follow spot booth where the spotlight are controlled from, and that got relocated from, it used to be on the upper balcony, so that kind of opened up the theater, and it sort of slotted in there a little bit more smoothly. So here's the backstage. The stage house was renovated to have a double level gridiron. The stage floor is capable of being lifted and lowered and restructured for a variety of different production requirements. And then you see the boxes kind of marching up the side, and these clamshell arches. You get a sense of the interior. And here's some shots of the finish from the upper balcony. One of the benefits of this is the highest level. You still have a really good view of the stage, which is part of the original architecture, but one of the benefits of being up here is that you get a really close look at all this beautiful decorative plaster. This is a view from the back of the upper, or the first balcony. One theme of this project was to improve accessibility, so we installed wider seats generally. There were dedicated accessible seating areas. There were closed loop hearing assisted devices installed, as well as a new accessible entrance and all of that. And then here's looking back from the stage, pulling it all together. So that's it.
Thank you, everyone. Do you want to come on up for Q&A? Lights. Indeed. Well, I want to start off by saying thank you so much to the presenters today. Adam, great save. Um, Really inspiring and makes me really appreciate architects and architecture. I was trying to think of, this is a last minute thing that I'm doing. So I was listening to everyone's presentations, besides the fact that being an architect who loves architecture and seeing all the hard work that goes into these projects. And obviously what you've shown is sort of a snippet of the process, the final design, but thinking about everyone's clients and the consultants and the contractors and artisans, it's an army of people that make these projects reality, right? And as an architect, I feel like we're sort of the cheerleader, the ringleader. We manage many different hats in order to move the project forward to that end. And everyone is, especially our clients, are heavily invested in the confidence that they have in our ability to manifest their dream. So my biggest takeaway was the labor of love, that each of these projects really imbued what I thought were extraordinary and incredible labors of love. And because we're interiors focused, how important interior space really is. And that JG talked about smaller spaces within his projects that were intimate, right? Each one of you on different scales created spaces that were welcoming and responsive to the clients and to the end user. So I say congratulations to all of you. I want to thank the audience as well for being here. I don't know if there's any actual clients that came to this event. I was just curious. Anyone? Clients? No clients? Anyways, so I'll start some Q&A. So Wendy, you talk about, from my memory, that you always try to find the missing piece. And what you talked about was the bringing together pets with owners, people with people. I thought the desk was an incredible, that entry desk of this communal space that really kind of shifted the idea of pet adoption. Can you just tell us a little bit about, I think I caught that you said it took 10 years to build this project?
Yes, we try not to remember too far.
Right.
Well, public work requires a different kind of commitment, even for a very small project. It takes a while to make it happen. Also, adaptive reuse. Adaptive reuse requires a lot of exploration, sort of spelunking, looking for things. I think also part of it, and I guess I want to throw this back as well, is that we had to develop a new narrative for the way that adoptions sort of unfolded. So as you say, to me, it was about that friendly front door. How do we bring people in? How do we make a bond between the staff and the community so that people can be better informed, feel when they're better informed, more relaxed? And again, so there's this idea of like the narrative that sort of unfolds and the emotional quality of it. And I think that was part of that, again, that entry experience to sort of take down the stress level. And that had to do with the planning. Sorry, dogs towards the rear, they're just noisier so that people don't feel overwhelmed, even if they're coming for dogs, not necessarily. So again, taking down that stress level, having everyone be in it together and sort of take that on.
Thank you.
Yeah.
ZGF. Sorry. When I first saw your project, I don't know if, did you come to the awards event? When the awards were announced, were you there? No. I was blown away by your project. The scale and the complexity and the feeling of peace in a very chaotic environment. What I thought particularly interesting was the 6 years of model making. Is that me? Adam. And, you know, we're such in a digital age at the moment. Let's see, I forgot, someone talked about not showing, JG doesn't create 3D models. He wants that impact at the end when your client discovers the project being built. And we're so, you know, our society is so interested in the hyper-realization of everything, right? So you get photorealistic renderings, you get photorealistic walkthroughs, and then to hear about this 6-year model building process, which I find, you know, takes me back to my education. Did that help in convincing your client to follow your lead?
Yes. I think a project of this scale was really difficult for anybody to really digest, especially like the way that you move through the rooms and the way that we say you're going to be able to find your way around. Like all the diagrams that we could draw like didn't quite drive the point home. It was really, and I'm actually really excited I get to mention this. We ended up building, like towards the end of DD, we built a 400 square foot model of the south half of the airport at half-inch scale. That's right, 400 square feet of model. And it was the walkthrough with the board of directors that I heard afterwards. They were like, oh, we get it now, and we're fully on board now. And we had gone through like a lot of DD. I don't know if I'm like really allowed to say this, but we had gone through a lot of DD where they were kind of like agreeing, but not enthusiastic. And it was really walking them through three-dimensional space with a three-dimensional model that it really was real to them because it was real. And so I think a lot of the decisions were so easy to make when you're seeing it like in this way. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that's it. Perfect. My answer would have been yes. And then, Skolnick, the church. You know, you said that your job was, I think, to how not to do much, in essence, right? And sometimes that is exactly what needs to be done, but is hard to execute. Not necessarily in the details, etc., but to uncover sort of or rebirth the space, and in a way that is both sort of giving a nod to history and also to providing new life to a space, but in such a delicate way that you had created these certain moves about not touching the exterior walls, etc. Did that come easily to you, or was that something, I mean, you also had I think it was great to see the space already sort of uncovered when you got the project, right? So when you walked in, there's probably some thoughts there. But as you were developing the project, was there a moment of which you had thought, oh, should I go more or should I go less? Should I go hard, should I go soft?
Well, you know, you have to listen. because I was able to spend so much time in the structure, which had been mostly demolished on the inside. But, you know, I just intuitively felt that if you got to a certain point and no further, that you left certain things extant, you would have that narrative you were talking about. You know, you would pick a perspective from which you would then make decisions. And that's, I mean, that's the key to any kind of art form. You know, one more blow of the hammer and it may be too much. But if you know, if you can feel when to stop, then you can start.
But what I also thought was interesting, going back to sort of like the rudimentary of what we do with model making. During COVID, you were sort of forced to be in the location of your project and to see it every day, which was, I mean, that's the reason why I became an architect. I used to walk around sites all the time. That's what inspired me. So were you kind of rejuvenated, regenerated by that kind of connection and in relationship to the proximity to you and the project?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I've been practicing since 1980, and there are certain moments in your trajectory and your evolution that actually make you turn in a certain direction. And, you know, the joy of being able to work with the craftsmen, with the contractors, not as a taskmaster and monitor to say, oh, you did that wrong, didn't you read the damn drawings, what's wrong with you? But to say, so what are we gonna do here? And to be very clear about the boundaries and to have a consensus with the craftspeople, it was wonderful. I mean, every time this project, for some reason, has won like 20 awards. It's crazy. And every time I get up and sometimes I have the contractor with me, and it's like we're, you know, we were at peace together. We were as one. And that just is a great experience, which I never knew existed until, you know, I'll just tell it very quickly. We were doing a museum in Bulgaria, a new building, and it was a children's museum. And there were activities on the roof, throughout the building, around the building. And I would go there periodically. We had a local architect as a partner, but I would go there and just see how things were going. And of course, it was a very challenging building for them because there wasn't a lot of good quality modern architecture being built. And so I was on the roof, and I saw this coping that looked really messy. And I said, you're not going to leave that like that, are you? And the contractor said, nobody will ever see it. And I said, God will see it. And from then on, anytime I went I approached the construction site, they said, God will see it is here. So it was nice at the church I didn't have to do anything like that.
Thank you. Palace Theater. When I first saw it presented at the awards, I guess not the awards ceremony, but when they announced the awards, I looked at it, I was like, oh, cool theater, nice. And then when I realized it was lifted 30 feet off the ground, I was like, wow, that's amazing. And to see the photographs of documenting and uncovering and discovery and pulling this thing apart, and it's like Humpty Dumpty, right, in a way. And then how it all came together, like, it was so beautiful. And to see the images of these hydraulic jacks, what, 3 inches every day or something like that? What did you say?
3 inch increments, but maybe a few feet a day.
Incredible. Was there a moment when you walked into the space and had that aha moment? Or even when your clients unexpected aha moment?
Well, I kind of took this project over from one of my partners who started it. He had to leave the project for health reasons, but so I was engaged sort of right just before the lift. So, and the project had been underway for many years before that, and huge team of conservators and multiple layers of oversight at every level. But it takes a leap of faith, to do something like this, but also a lot of due diligence and a lot of just careful preparation and double checking and time. When we were in the middle of sort of the renovation of the plaster work, after the lift had occurred, and the place had looked like it had kind of been torn apart. We were really worried. The theater owner was really worried, actually. They didn't want any images shown of the theater because in that condition, because it's a little distressing, actually, to see it like that. But you know that you're working with a quality team of craftsmen, and you're relying on their input and their advice and their expertise, their skills, their artistry, frankly, throughout. And it was just a daily process of everybody kind of coming together and reviewing and nurturing this thing along. And slowly it comes back to life.
Ink. So let's see, I think for 20 years, my periodontist was in one of the buildings, so I would pass through that concourse, I think twice a year. What was the biggest challenge for you in this project?
I think the location, the pressure of taking responsibility for that location.
Because there's so much energy, right? Like there's
Yeah.
so much going on. You talked about the office user, the tourist, and the New Yorker, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And how to mitigate all of that.
Yeah. I mean, for us, I don't know. I think it's interesting to talk about this as an interior for me, because it's hard for me to see it as interior because it's public space on some level, even though it's inside. I mean, I think it's weird also that we even have an interiors committee at the AIA. I'll be honest.
Why do you say that?
Because we spend 80% of our time inside, and the idea that somehow there's this difference between architecture and interiors, and they're not seen as a seamless discipline. What? Hello, yeah. So, I mean, my dream would be that someday we don't need an interiors department, and we don't have, or a committee, and we don't have, architecture and interiors sort of playing a game of privilege between the two, which is the more hierarchically important.
Well, I came up with this, well, I had lots of different ideas when everyone was talking about it. I said, one of my thoughts was reclaim and claim difference between interiors and architecture, right?
Nice.
But we could talk about that another time. I do agree with you, but keep going, because I also agree with your space too, right? Because it's interior, but it works as an exterior space because of all the people traveling and traversing, right?
Right, and it's fundamentally a kind of public service or public utility or urban space, as it were, but it is an interior. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's one of the things that we enjoyed about the project the most, was that it's, for us as a studio and our investment in blurring those lines, it itself blurred those lines as a commission. So that was pressure, I think, for us. So to go back to your original question, I think what was the most challenging thing was to really bring that, manifest that, to use your word, in that context. So.
Cool. Thank you. JG. You talked about the intimate space, right? It's a townhouse, complete renovation. That stair is beautifully sculpted, right? I'm surprised you even admitted that you said you would walk away and just leave that stair rail in wood, that you didn't push for it. You probably did push for it, right, in brass? But that becomes the sculptural element, right, that ties the entire project together, because it's in, as you said, it's the bell-shaped plan, right, where that stair is in the center. It's the sculptural element. It's the workhorse in terms of pulling people up and down that townhouse. The budget looked good. What was that? And you talked about the materiality and the details in those doors, and I see the different materials used in the bathrooms, right? So in that minimal sense, because there is also a dichotomy between the maximalist and the minimalist, right? I believe in the couple. I thought there was a good play between the two. It was really thoughtfully executed to find that right balance. And how did you find that right balance between yourself, Span, and Francis?
I mean, it was a group effort. I mean, I won't lie. I mean, I think there was two very, very sophisticated clients, an incredibly traveled, very sophisticated interior designer, and hopefully I was well suited in that group. You can only hope. But it was a lot of conversations, and it was a lot of trial and error. I think we went to 7 different cities for stone. It was a bit ridiculous. It wasn't exactly the most eco-friendly project ever. But there was just a lot of trial and error. We started off, we went down so many blind paths. The one thing that never really changed was the stair, which is great. I'm going to echo what Lee said. Just the level of collaborativeness on site made for that. The contractor understood we needed some time to figure some of these things out. That not everyone was on the same page. We were able to, through this good relationship that we had with this builder, with these consultants, and at some point, really a nice trust level established with this client who's based in London, so not even here half the time or most of the time. It was. I don't think anyone started off with this project in mind, and I don't think you could have imagined this at the end. And everyone kind of listened to everyone. The stair was again what you said. This collaborative process. I love going to the site. It was like our clubhouse. We'd hang out. We'd have some coffee, talk about design. Work out a detail, maybe look at a requisition. It was actually really. I just kind of wanted to hang out there for a while. The contractor has now gotten very corporate and not quite the same, but that's too bad. People change. But at the time, it was a really nice experience, and I think that's what kind of got us there. Figuring out how you can get a little extra time to work on this one thing, find some other things that will make the clients happy and get them on the same page. And they were nice. They weren't like yelling or anything. It wasn't one of those things. They were 2 lovely British people, very sweet. So it's just about having the team that'll get you the time to do what you need to do, because it was not immediate.
It feels like a visual conversation.
It was a very visual conversation, yeah.
You mentioned, oh, go ahead. You mentioned a few minutes ago this idea of a labor of love. It shows. It really
does.
It really shows if you become that committed, that dedicated, that sensitive to the variables that you have to find ways to synthesize. If you have the time, if you're given the time to do it, and you can mock things up, which the way people in our office who are just out of school, they've never made a model in their lives. They've done everything on the computer. And I say, just take some chipboard. You will understand the project so much better if you can really feel it. And much less, spend time with a craftsperson, gradually giving birth to something completely new. I mean, it's a gift. It's a privilege. It's why we all, rack our brains and don't always have enough money to pay our bills.
Oh, that's universal, right?
I just had a thought based on that and a comment that you made earlier. about the craft that goes into it, being a labor of love. I keep hearing that AI is going to take over all of our jobs, and seeing all of this work, there's no way I can do this. So I thank you all for the quality of work. It made me feel at peace today.
Far Rockaway Library. Those two images, the rendering, which wasn't photorealistic, and then there was the photo, right? And I immediately noticed that pole thing that was there. I was like, oh. At first, I thought to myself, that's exactly what we try to do, is put some weird thing in our renderings to make it look real. Reality was, it was real, right? And what I liked about that specifically was, in the very beginning, you talked about the environment around it. And here is this beautiful Snowetta library, brand new, in this environment that has been developed and will continue to evolve. And with all that time and effort, obviously someone didn't send that email off to someone in whatever service to say, hey, can we move this or relocate it? What is the response by the end user? In your photographs, there are lots of people visiting the library. Can you tell us a little bit about that, what the general public's response is to using the library?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things about the project. When we first went out there to interview, we just kind of went on our own to talk to people around the old library. There's this library from the 60s that used to stand there. It was one floor, 8,000 or 9,000 square feet. The new library is 18,000 square feet. And we went and asked people about how they used the library, what it meant to them, just to kind of get a sense informally of what the community was like and how they felt about it. And we told them that we were the architects for this new library, and they could not believe that there was going to be a new library. No way. And it's sad that it took so long, because it sort of built upon that belief. But they couldn't believe, nobody's going to make that library for us. Nobody's going to make a new building for us. Nobody cares about this community. And to see them walk in on opening day at the ribbon cutting and just be ecstatic, like, holy, they made this for us. And this is amazing. Like, I've never seen a library like this. So I've been back since then, and it's not uncomfortably crowded, but really well used, and it's amazing. It's so exciting. I wish it didn't take 2.5 hours to get there from here, but it's really, really fun to see it, and I think they're happy. Yeah, it takes forever.
But I just want to say, I'm really glad that you sort of, maybe we're ending here, but talked about that emotional content. And that was something we talked about at the airport, that idea of de-stressing the experience of what it meant to fly, coming into something that was welcoming. And it's interesting because all these projects are very different in scale and program, but underlying it all is this sort of the love of making, right? And the belief in the people, and that kind of content coming around. It's very interesting for me.
We have time for one question.
One question. One question. Who's the lucky person? Amy? Going once? Twice? Stefan? No question? No questions? All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all for coming. And as I said earlier, we have some upcoming events. Please do take a look at the website. And we look forward to seeing you again here at the center. Thank you.